Hello, would you like to come and take a seat? We're about to start the event. Bring your drink, come and find a seat, pick somewhere where you can see the screen. We're going to be starting right now. We've got an online audience, so we don't want to run over too much. I'm sure people will join as the event rolls. We're going to start with a few words from the conduit, from Rosie. Whoop, whoop. Round of applause to one of our sponsors.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I'm not going to share too many words. I'm just going to kick us off with a conduit icebreaker, which is what we do at the start of all of the programming events that we have here. So if I could ask you to turn to the person next to you, and someone that you didn't come with, don't know, haven't spoken to before, ideally, and along the lines of the session and the talk this evening, I'm sure you've all come wearing your rented outfits and your second-hand clothes and your circular textiles. But if you could talk to each other about what your guilty item of clothing in your wardrobe is. You've got a couple of minutes and then we're going to kick off.
Okay, well done, everyone. Always good to meet your neighbour. I hope that wasn't too boring for the online audience. You couldn't exactly turn to the person next to you. Never mind. Right, so quietly carry on bringing your drinks from the bar and finding a nice comfy seat. We're going to kick off now. We have 85 minutes of jam-packed updates for you. Welcome, everyone, to World Circular Textiles Day 2023. Woohoo! This is our fourth World Circular Textiles Day. We can hardly believe it. But, of course, it keeps falling on the weekend, so we keep having to move things around. Next year, it's on a Tuesday. So it's safe to say it will be on the 8th of October next year. So my name is Professor Becky Early, and I'm your host this evening here at the Conduit in London, along with my fellow co-founders, Cindy, Gwen, and Kate. And yes, you can definitely clap. We're trying to work out, I don't think we have ever been in the same room together, ever. As all four of us. Yeah. This has happened online, and this really happened, during the pandemic. This is how all this came about. But it's really lovely and very special that we're all here tonight. And Kate's 50 tomorrow. So, even more exciting things to celebrate. Right, seriously though, the clock is ticking and we're now just 27 years away from 2050. The year we've predicted full textile circularity could be achieved. So welcome to everyone in the room. Thank you so much for traveling here today. And to all of those joining online, welcome. We've got a great lineup and an event tonight which has got a theme. We are looking at global different perspectives on circularity, how they differ globally, how circularity is perceived and being tackled in different regions, and what some of the challenges and opportunities are in this rapidly emerging global space. So you probably know a lot about the circularity on your home turf. What do you know about things on the other side of the globe? We hope to hear from many voices tonight from the room and from our online audience. We won't be able to hear from everyone, of course, but do leave your questions in the YouTube live stream and we'll address as many as we can today. This evening, we aim to dive into detail on some of the global locations represented by our esteemed guests and this year's Circular Heroes. Bit of an echo. If your country's missing, do participate on the live stream, and you can participate in the room. Please use the hashtag WCTD 2023 and WCTD 2050. Either of them work. So we also want to encourage you and remind you to log your details on the Knowledge Hub. This is the way that you can appear on our global mapping project, and in a little bit you're going to see something very special that we've created this year. Tonight we have, first up, we have a panel where we're reflecting on the progress around the globe, and then we're going to zoom in on a report from Indonesia, including a film which gives you some of the highlights from our fascinating trip there earlier this year. We'll be revealing a taster from the Knowledge Hub's data visualization project, including a fireside chat, I think that's what they call it these days, with Jonathan from Holition. And finally, we are going to be launching something else that's quite special, the toolkit, because this is our 4th event. And next year, there's going to be a lot of events happening all around the place using our toolkit. So more about that later, but there's already a lot of activity going on around the globe. So, a bit clunky, sorry about that. We'd like to give a shout out to our other signatory events in 2023. In Indonesia today, RTL put together an event with speakers including the Singapore Fashion Council, the Deputy Minister for Economic Affairs, the Head of Green Industry from the Ministry of Industry. WCTD made a presentation this morning, 7 a.m, with some of our reflections from our field trip there. We want to welcome those of you who have stayed up extra late to attend online. Welcome. In the Philippines, an amazing initiative. Where Forward is carrying out a whole week of activities, including Circular Textile Tales, a series of 30-minute Instagram live interviews scheduled between the 9th and the 13th of October. So follow Where Forward on Instagram to see what's happening in the Philippines. In Canada, D-Brand opened a new textiles recycling headquarters in British Columbia, the first of its kind in Canada, to provide sortation technology for textile reuse, recycling and recovery. They've also held a workshop and they filmed it, and it'll be on our WCTD YouTube channel from tomorrow. In Ireland, the Environmental Protection Agency are hosting an industry workshop next week, linking to our WCTD celebrations around the topic of circular use and consumption. And in the UK, we've heard, through the grapevine, unofficially, that RAP are releasing their Circular Textile Toolkit this week, also in alignment with WCTD. So, big round of applause for all of those global activities. The word is spreading. And you know, we're all about celebration, we're all about lifting the voices up, we're all about positive actions and analysis and critical viewpoints too, but we do want to celebrate the steps forward. So we'd also like to highlight some of the progress this year from our core themes in the Knowledge Hub. So in materials, the Salvation Army is launching a mechanical recycling process for polyester in partnership with Plan B. The process will be able to take 2,500 tonnes of pure polytextiles in year 1, and they'll be testing feedstocks over the next year. Brilliant progress, well done. Usher Yarns announced a strategic partnership with Burla Cellulose, another WCTD signatory, to collaborate and produce recycled yarn with more than 50% textile waste in it. Accelerating Circularity created the working group, the Alliance of Chemical Textile Recycling, ACTR, to provide the textile industry with a common voice on textile chemical recycling. Significant advances have been made with many of these technologies, progressing brand and product collaborations between Circ and Inditex, for example, and progressing the industrial scale-up plans and new investments like that going on at Worn Again. In the products and services category, July was a busy month for circular products and services, especially when it comes to transformative legislation. Like, very little happens without legislation. So to name just a few highlights, it started with France hosting a bonus scheme to incentivize consumers to make clothing and shoe repairs, and will offer discounts of €6 to €25 per repair in a bid to reduce landfill waste. Then the European Commission announced a proposal to introduce mandatory extended producer responsibility, EPR as you know it, schemes for textiles in all EU member states. And simultaneously in the UK, we unveiled the Circular Textile Plan, including EPR. The Maximising Resources, Maximising Waste programme brings together a range of measures backed by government funding to help keep products and materials in circulation for as long as possible. Okay, zipping through the people and society category. Where's my auto cue, Cindy? We exciting developments really with COS partnering with Visa's new Re-commerce Behavioural Insights Lab, an initiative running experiments to understand how consumers can be helped in engaging with a more circular economy. Okay, and I'm going to stop talking and sharing these examples, and you now need to tell us. I want to hear from the audience 1 or 2 examples. What stood out for you this year? What advancements, what developments, what progress has been made that needs to be on the map? What happened this year that we want to hear about? There's a roaming mic. It's your turn to think about it. Do you make materials? We've got our panelists. You're not allowed to talk now because you're going to answer that in a little bit. Also online, you can type into the chat bar in YouTube. So,
anyone want to talk about wrap? Come on, Christina. She's in the front row. She can.
I know. I sit here to listen, and I would say just a lot of the movements with NIR technology and also some image recognition. Small businesses that are really moving forward in terms of scanning lots of garments to understand if you can build data sets to understand reusability of items. So that's a good one.
Brilliant one, thank you.
Any other shout outs? Come on, there's been so much activity this year.
You're very welcome to just listen and soak it up. I mean, we have been doing the research, so yes, somebody at the back there.
Where was that? Tanya.
Our friend Tom.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Tanya, and I'm a founder of Cycon, wardrobe services aggregator. So we've launched in the UK this year, but what's also exciting, a company which produces sustainable aviation fuel from textiles has also launched this year called Aviox. So
wow, that's amazing.
Another set of news. Thank you.
Textiles. Gosh, we're going to be fighting over our recycling bins now. Great, thank you. All right, Sana, anything come up online? Yeah? Yeah, go on, you can tell us.
All right. Wazir Hussain is saying recycling of textiles back to fibre for new fields. And somebody else, Artisanat, Uganda banning second-hand clothing imports and putting a stop to textile waste decolonization.
Big themes coming up, more and more decolonization in this textile sector. Brilliant. Well, thank you, everybody, for that opening section. We really just wanted to highlight some of the progress. It's actually amazing what happens in a single year. You're going to see how that looks in the visualization in a little bit. But we're going to move now to the panel. So I'd like to invite the 3 panelists to come up and take a seat. They're going to sit in life cycle order. They've rehearsed this. They know where they're meant to sit. Okay.
You can go in a circle.
All right. I'm going to very quickly introduce you and then hand over with a big chunky question. So this is all about global insights, really, and looking at what developments have been going on through our experts' different businesses and roles, but also more broadly, because they're actually industry voices, industry advocates, so their knowledge is very broad. Tricia. So Tricia Carey has believed in progress over perfection throughout her whole career. As an advocate for innovation and circularity in the textile and apparel industry, she recently joined Renewcell to accelerate the commercial development of circulose. Welcome and thank you for coming. Okay, so Catherine is the Director of Sustainability of Shein and has been in the role since 2022. She specialises in sustainable product development from concept to customer in the apparel industry. Welcome. And last but by no means least, as the CEO of Texaid for almost 20 years now, Martin is an expert and contributor in many different textile circular economy initiatives and is a representative of the interests of the textile recycling industry at a worldwide level. We see you everywhere. We see you everywhere. So we've brought you together today to start to think for us about where have you been traveling, what have you been seeing? And I'm going to open this with one big question, and then each panelist is going to take a couple of minutes to answer that question from their own perspective. That's going to give us all this lovely knowledge bank from which we are then going to have a very rich discussion. So, in the last year, where have we seen significant change or progress being made when it comes to raw materials and production, consumption and use, and post-use? What have the milestones of 2023 been for your business and for the industry more broadly? What are the trends, small or seismic? Tricia, would you like to start?
Yeah, I mean, these are such loaded questions, and great to be here. Thanks for the invitation to be here in person. I think, if I look at Renewcell, where we are textile to textile recycler, and we take cellulose and make it into a pulp. For us, this year was very big because we actually launched and opened our first industrial scale facility and started shipping from Sweden around the world to get this textile to textile recycling happening. So I often say it's like every day is a new day in history for Renewcell because we're always reaching new milestones. But I would say overall in the industry, what I'm seeing and globally from my travels is when I'm in China, I'm hearing much more around circularity and seeing it happening across all materials. So not just around cellulosics, but also what's happening in textile to textile recycling with polyester. And it's becoming much more mainstream to look at all of this. And also I think we're reaching a point where you don't have to sell people on circularity, it's understood. So, sometimes it becomes almost a little frustrating, all the conversations. And where are we turning the conversations into action is a big part of it. And I see that it's less around selling that story around circularity, and really people are now starting to line up. How do they move forward? How do they kind of set their strategy, make the roadmap, and move into action? And that's really where we want to see, and that's all a part of World Circular Textiles Day, and seeing each year where we're moving more into action and making this change a reality.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. It's nice to sense that sort of enthusiasm and that interest, and not having to start every conversation from the beginning. People really understand now.
Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Same question to Shein. So how's it looking from your perspective?
Yeah, so I have a background in environmental science and fashion design. So I know for a lot of people who are really interested in fashion design, really passionate about fashion, they don't necessarily, even though we'd like to think that everyone is thinking about sustainability on a daily basis, they're not necessarily. And so customers and brands are all on their journey to advance sustainability and circularity within the spaces in which they work. And so for me, I came from high-end and then started working with Shein a year and a half ago. And part of that move was looking at how to make impact at scale, because you can be a small brand, and that's wonderful for brands of all shapes and sizes to be working on these problems. But it really takes everybody. Like, everyone has to be working on this in order to make significant progress by 2030 or 2050 in the case of World Circular Textiles Day goal. So at Shein, part of what I am working on is looking at circularity throughout the supply chain process. So from the products that we make, how do we include more circular materials and circularity in the actual design of the products? Then also designing out, working with our suppliers to design out waste, but then also working on end of life. What happens when our customers buy things? It's no secret that when you have an affordable fashion piece, people don't necessarily know how to value it. I know that I've had pieces that were very cost effective when I bought them, that I've had for 10 years. And then I also have pieces that I've worn from luxury that fall apart after one. So it's really about educating a new generation of customers around how do you care for fashion, how can you afford it, but not treat it like waste. Fashion should never be treated like waste. And so a lot of that education does have to come from the brands. Shein works has customers in over 150 countries around the world. And so it's really the responsibility of a brand like Shein, where people are going to, whether it be our app or Instagram or TikTok. That's the way a lot of young people are accessing fashion and are interested in learning about fashion, giving them touch points where they're at in understanding sustainability. You're not born understanding sustainable fashion, or much less, circularity. So there are a lot of different places where we're looking at education of customers, designers, both internal our designers and also the emerging designers that we work with through a program called SheInX, where we work with over 3,000 emerging designers in how to create their visions and trying to get them to look at it from a more sustainable angle. And then also the suppliers that we work with, how do you get waste out of the process? And that's really challenging.
So it's a big challenge for Shein to do circularity when it's a sort of a lower end of the market and massive volume. As you're sort of highlighting, that there's a lot of innovation coming from smaller brands that have more flexibility in their supply chain. So you've taken on quite a challenging role to really address circularity. Are you seeing in your time there, are you seeing progress? Are you seeing it becoming a reality?
Absolutely. I think one of the things that brought me to Shein that I thought was really exciting is that it's a very young, very innovative brand, actually. A lot of people don't really know much about how it works, but it's pretty much a technology company that also offers fashion. And so a lot of what it does is with a tech mindset of trying new things, innovating, that kind of like fail fast and try new things and then scale what works. So from a production standpoint, the company does small batch production of all the SKUs that it runs, and so it's a great opportunity to test new things. So one thing that I've been really excited to launch in the last year was our partnership with Queen of Raw. Some of you in the space may know of Queen of Raw, but it's a SaaS platform that helps connect brands who have a lot of excess materials. Most brands who work on sort of that, who have traditional retail locations often have a lot of excess fabric at the end of their design cycle, and Queen of Raw allows us to buy that excess from other brands and actually make it into new fashion so that it doesn't go to waste, it doesn't go to landfill, it actually gets a chance to be fashion, which it was meant to be. And so that's been a really exciting project. The other project that when I first came on, I was like, this needs to happen, and was really excited for it to be one of my first projects, was Shein Exchange, which is a peer-to-peer resale. We know a lot of our customers want to buy things for an event. Of course, we want them to wear them multiple times. We actually did a great study recently showing that many customers, like 30-something% of our customers, wear their Shein clothes more than 30 times. But there are still that percentage that want to buy something once, look great, and then don't want it anymore. So we launched Shein Exchange last year to give them an easy way to resell. And then are expanding to the UK, France, and Germany this year. And we'll keep doing that for different markets.
Great, okay, so we need a lot of innovation right across the spectrum with that
Absolutely.
really big customer base. Thank you, we'll come back with more questions. But Martin, how have things been looking at the end-of-life collection sorting side of things this year?
Yeah, I think I can agree here with Tricia that there's much more awareness on the end of life and also on the circularity of textiles, which is needed. I think we need to translate that into action, but there are also some initiatives and what we've been working on also with the REUPS initiative, which was initiated by our text, was the study on the gap, and there's a big gap still in Europe and probably worldwide as well on collection and sorting capacity, and of course also recycling capacity. And I think we we really need to close that, and that's also where we are working on. I mean, Texaid, we have committed ourselves to build up a new facility by the end of next year with 50,000 tons, and we are also going to go further after that to really get that gap closed. And what we have been discussing also before, just over drinks here, is we have the bit of a chicken egg problem, and nobody is really showing their cards. And I think that's something we really need to work on as an industry. And I think we see also some more openness to really discuss on the value chain, because at the end we need really to work on that together. So we need to work from the brands who need to commit on using recycled contents over the recycling producers like Renewcell and others, to the collectors and sorters, to get that business case running, and also to get the feedstock agreements and to get that investments unlocked. And that's the important part. And as I said, I mean, we are still not there, but we see some development. And that's what we saw also over the last year.
Thank you. And you're also really involved in advisory level on EU policy and all those sort of discussions. So is that helping accelerate things? Is there progress there?
Yeah, I think it will really accelerate the development if it comes as it is discussed right now. So if you're looking at the new Waste Framework Directive, which is currently discussed, there's an EPR. I think we mentioned it before for textiles. You mentioned that mandatory EPR for all member states, or the mandatory collection, and we will also see some scale up there probably next year. I mean, it hasn't happened. I think what we also have to say, that not enough has happened yet. So I've just been in a discussion the day before yesterday on that, and we don't see so much. We see less action than we would have expected from the member states. I mean, there are a couple of member states in the EU who introduced EPRs, like the Netherlands, and actually only the Netherlands. And there is some discussion in some other member states, but like Italy, for example, but it has not been tangible yet. So I think they are a little lacking behind. And also what we've heard now is the Green Deal is going, and then the war in Ukraine has a bit to do with that. It's going to be a bit in the backseat. The Commission also thinks a lot of industrial politics and things, so we really need to push that to keep that up. And
so having momentum is so tricky, isn't it? And like you're saying, what you're experiencing really is this sort of political and economic sort of factors that hinder the progress that you've all laid out quite clearly that could be made, but
exactly. I think that's what we are seeing now. But nevertheless, I think it makes absolutely sense. And also we are quite convinced. And I mean, the McKinsey study also showed that in the longer run, it will be also economically viable to use recycled content. So we just need to bridge the gap for the next 8 to 10 years. And we need to also to, of course, push for that towards the regulatory bodies, and that's what.
So it's been, because there's, and we talk about this all the time, the solutions now are there in phase one of what we've been able to see technically that's possible for reprocessing, reselling, recycling materials, but we're now seeing a gap that maybe was or wasn't anticipated, and we've got to come up with new strategies to bridge the gaps, keep things moving, speed things up, new incentives. It's a constant challenge. It's a constant sort of big mountain we're climbing. I want you to start thinking of questions, because we're going to throw it out to the audience in a second, but I'm just going to come back over here to the beginning, because while you were talking, I remembered years ago I was working for VF in North Carolina at the same time as H&M in Sweden, and then visiting factories in China, and the differences in cultural sort of and conversations around sustainability in that sort of couple of months I travelled was staggering. Have they all caught up?
No, they have not. Definitely not. And I think, to what you were saying, Martin, what we see happening in Europe, there's a much stronger ambition around the European companies, the brands, to move forward. And then what I see happening with US brands, still very much trying to figure it out, and everyone's waiting to see who else is going to make the first move. And it goes back to, like you were saying, it's chicken and egg, and where are we going to begin? And yet I see a strong interest from the value chain and really to build this network around circularity. And that's something we've been fostering in the past year as well, if I look at 2023 and some of these milestones. And in July with Circulose, we had 47 partners, that's spinners, knitters, mills that were using viscose made with Circulose. And actually today, in celebration of World Circular Textiles Day, we announced our next group, which was 116 suppliers. So really happy to double this amount of suppliers. So that I relate back to Asia. So when we look across what's happening in US, Europe, and Asia, the ambition to bring this forward. But it's a seesaw where it balances back and forth. And we need to, designers need to see that it's real and it can be produced. And then, it goes back and forth where the suppliers need to see that there's the demand from the brands.
Yeah.
And so how do we keep moving this and moving it at a pace? Let's not keep waiting seasons and seasons. Let's make this change the reality now.
So yeah, because, in producing new materials, fibers at this end, that's where we're most familiar as brands and designers. Let's source the fabric that's going to answer all of our questions. Let's get the miracle eco cloth and off we go. So maybe it's sort of easier to sort of buy that in, but then to build new business models, there's money, cost, risk involved. You've got to educate the consumer, so, and then with the gaps that you didn't envisage in terms of the investment to get the collecting and sorting up, there's different kind of problems right across.
Totally. The complexities around circularity that exist, but if I boil it down to the three main things, it's around accessibility, it's around quality, and it's around value. And building off of those three areas, then how we can continue to bring that into the whole network around circularity.
Yeah, good, that's good. Did you write that down? Since you did write that down, well done.
Yeah, and I would just say, between each of us, I think we represent different parts of the circular supply chain, from fiber to brands to collector and sorter. But there are a number of different pieces between us in the chain, and I think being able to talk to each other is really important. Collective action is the only way that you create an actual circular economy. We're literally building an economy that doesn't exist. It's been, hundreds of years, if not thousands of years of a linear economy evolving. So we're trying to invent something in the next, X number of years that doesn't exist. So I think when we're having conversations about how do we get, the Renewcell fiber into a textile with our textile suppliers, you have the spinners along the way and dyers and all kinds of things, and being able to take a global supply chain and make it as linear as possible to get it from here to here is quite challenging.
Yeah.
But I think it's really important, and if we can be innovative, I think that's one of the things that I'm really excited about, is being able to move really fast and try new things. I think a lot of brands can be quite scared to try something new, and it is quite difficult. So I think we can make a lot of progress.
And what about the collecting and the sorting? Is that a kind of whole new system at a national and then global level, or is this going to work very differently in each country?
Yeah, I think we can just talk about Europe. We don't have any experience outside of Europe, but I think what we will see is a more converging system of collecting the textiles once also the member states really need to have that up and running, and that's by 2025, so quite the day after tomorrow. So we also expect there are some increasing quantities. It will not be that on the 1st January of 2025 the quantities will double from now, but that will be increasing over time as the systems are getting more mature and installed. And also what we will also see is, of course, with the Waste Shipment Directive, that much more sorting capacity is needed in Europe. So what we see is that we need to extend that sorting capacity by ×3 until 2030 as an industry. So that's quite a lot. That's investment volume somewhere around €1 billion as an industry, just for the sorting part, not keeping in mind the recycling part. And we need to see how how as an industry we can do that. And I think some topics of what is really important, and you mentioned that in your intro, is of course also on technology. I mean, some automized AI and infrared technologies for more standardized sorting are absolutely needed. We need to be able to scale that business. Right now, sorting is a very manual and very subjective process, and we need to make that more objective. And this is something where we are really heavily investing in as Tekstil to technology-wise and also capacity-wise to build that up. And I think that is also what is needed, and that is also what recyclers like Renewcell and others, like others, they need, because they need some feedstock security in terms of quantities, in terms of defined qualities, and in terms of pricing. And so I think the collecting and sorting industry needs to mature, it needs to concentrate. We will see a couple of larger players emerge. There will be also some new players entering the industry, most probably, in order to really build that up. And this is something which will also, we are very convinced that it will happen.
Yeah, that's been a real learning curve for me, working with Cindy and the others. You know, that if you don't have that reliable, secure feedstock coming into the recycling companies, you can't build and grow the business.
But we need that on both ways. I mean, also for the scale up of the sorting. I mean, we need to have feedstock agreements in both ways. I mean, the recyclers need feedstock agreements to get their input right. We need also feedstock agreements, offtake agreements, to get the investment for our sorting facilities unlocked. So it's a win-win at the end. It's just something which needs to be started now.
You remind me a little bit of all of you actually, of politicians, because you have to sort of advocate for the ideas, and you have to educate other people, and you have to have sort of policies and almost campaign, because the change isn't like, you know, it's not being pulled through the market in a linear way. It's a whole new world you're trying to build.
It's a constant, you're educating, and it's educating with emotion, right? Because when we get people and we find those champions within companies that will help us to get further, to get to the next level. But it's also then turning those opportunities into the reality of projects and in getting that going and getting beyond pilots. That's one thing. And to move beyond capsules. We're not in capsules and pilots. We need to move into regular flow of apparel and be in true programs. And we have to always look at, there's nowhere that you can go on the internet and find how to make a garment. And so it's the old way of the connecting and the networking that happens. And that's the beauty of our industry. It's the creativity and the business coming together. So it's always around the education, those opportunities and the connections in order to make circularity come together.
Great. Well, I hope WCTD is doing a good job on helping you with those connections and collaborations and bringing people together. Got a few minutes now to throw it open to the floor. So who's got a burning question for the panel? Over here. Where's my roaming mic people? Thank you. Would you like to say who you are?
Hi. Is this on? Yeah. Awesome. Hi, my name is Katie Pfeiffer. I'm actually an anthropologist researching kind of sustainability. One of my questions is around degrowth. So if we're talking about circularity, circularity works if there aren't things in like constantly moving in, but that's not something that anybody here has mentioned, is actually reducing the amount of things that are either produced or used, reducing the amount of things coming into the world. Is that, especially with something like Shein, where it's predicated on constant growth, as you were saying, move fast and kind of iterate and break things. But where is the limit to growth?
Good question. Thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the main issues from a sustainability standpoint that we're all concerned about in the fashion industry, and you know, accessible fashion included, but also like literally any fashion industry, is the consumption of new resources and the production of waste at the end of the life cycle. And so the idea of circularity is to be closing the loop on those things so that you do not need to be extracting new natural resources and that you are not producing waste. And so there are certain ways that customers want to be able to express themselves through fashion, want to be able to, you know, show up into the world and feel confident because they feel like they've been represented and they feel like they can find things in their size, in their style that feel like them and that's authentic. So I think to an extent, it's still really important to have choice out there and accessibility. But with accessibility and choice does come this issue of consumption and waste. And that's why creating these circular supply chains is the only way to be able to satisfy the social and artistic beauty of fashion, but in a more sustainable way.
The degrowth conversation is really tricky, because if for a sustainability advocate in the room, they want to see carbon come right down. They want to see all exploitation and use of resources come right down. So, but to have a degrowth conversation with any business goes against the grain of profit. So how do we tackle that?
I think one very important aspect is, of course, also the second-hand part of circularity. So I mean, what we need is we need to have durable textiles or durable garments, and a durable garment does not mean I have to wear that suit 50 times, even if it is wearable 50 times. I mean, I can also sell it on to someone, I can donate it, I can discard it, and it's going to a sorting facility and it's going to be resold as a second-hand item. So what we really need to also do is really to keep that second-hand part alive, and that's an important aspect also in that whole discussion. We sometimes see we need to really assess for each garment, is it still wearable and does it have a market, and if it does, and if it can be worn a couple of times, then it should go into that market, and it should be recycled after, because it doesn't really matter. I mean, I hope it's 100% cotton. I'm not 100% sure, but if it's 100% cotton, it does not matter. It doesn't matter if the arms are really thin now. If I give it then to Renewcell, they can make some viscose out of it. So I can wear that once and give it to them, or I can wear it 100 times, or not I, but 5 people can wear it in total 100 times, and then give it to Renewcell, and the material value of that garment will be the same.
So the growth comes from the circles that don't exist yet, but they're there.
We need to find new business models.
Regenerated materials at this end. Lots of wear, lots of clever sizing, lots of sort of business model improvements, efficiency improvements here, and then this amazing resell, flow, sorting, and then back to this end.
And that's not only true for garments. I mean, if you look at the car industry, that's quite established. I mean, nobody would throw away a car which is still driving and which will get still to TÜV or whatever the equivalent is called here in the UK. But for lower value goods, of course, we throw them away much earlier. And I think we need to rethink that whole system. And I think that's something.
Weren't we, about food waste on a phone call recently, because that's such a big problem globally. And of course, we could feed the world if we didn't waste a third of everything that gets produced. So degrowth is also about this absolutely sort of, what's the word? I can't think of it, but optimization of the capacity that we have, and really eradicating all kinds of waste.
But we also talked about that, not only about food waste. I mean, food waste is something we talked about that is time dependent. And then when you ask before what is our most sinful piece of cloth or garment in the room, I said, hey, that's my morning suit, because I only wore that 3 times. And it's still hanging there. But it should have. I should have rendered.
Morning, as in.
No,
like
morning,
wedding.
like my cut.
Huh?
You British guys, you know that your day suit, like
Okay.
we call that morning suit, and in Germany, I don't know, cut. So I only wore that 3 times, so I should have rented that.
We have plenty of unworn stuff in our wardrobes, all of us. So that is a behaviour change thing that needs.
And this is if you think about your most negative garment, it's the one you don't wear, no matter what it is produced of. I mean, I can have a full 100% polyester, whatever shirt. Doesn't matter if I wear it every day or if I wear it until the end of life. It doesn't matter. The one which costs resources is the one I don't wear, which is just hanging there without being used and being thrown away.
And I think it's
after
that
20 years.
excess, isn't it, that really irritates people about the brands like Shein at the lower end of the market, because there's a feeling that there's an evidence that people are buying more than they need. But at the same time, you've already highlighted freedom of expression, creativity, and that sort of choice. And I've worked in this field for nearly 30 years now. You can't change people. You can't unless you're using legislation. People sort of buying, spending power, who they fall in love with. You can't control that. And so we've got to be making the systems that serve people, that make people happy. And I think in particular now we're in a time of great economic climate anxiety, cost of living crisis. Clothing will always be pleasure to people. So actually it's going to be really hard to guilt people into different behaviors. Have I been really provocative? You're shaking your head.
No, I fully agree with you. I always say, hey, you tell us we cannot drive cars anymore, we cannot fly on vacation, we cannot eat meat, and then you tell us we cannot wear whatever we want. I mean, that's not going to work.
Well, it's just that it's right down, if you look at that carbon impacts, it's right down here, the clothing side, and actually it is the bigger things like not owning a car, having fewer kids. And so people are going to have to make a lot of changes. And I just really feel like we need to tap into the pleasure principle with circular fashion and textiles to sort of get somewhere. But I'm going to throw it again to the audience. I've got the big finger from my timekeeper here to say, hurry up. One more question and then we're going to move on. Thank you.
Hi, so I wanted to refer to a question I was asked on, that was actually not a question, but a statement I was thrown in the chat about the banning of secondhand clothing in Uganda. And so this year in July, I went to Ghana and I spoke to informal workers in Kantamanto Market, the biggest secondhand market in West Africa. And so I don't tend to have, I came with the same insight that it should be banned, but I left thinking having a bit more of a complex view on the issue of secondhand clothing. But I wanted to know how the industry or the concept of circular fashion is actually thinking about the informal markets that are actually recirculating the clothes at scale in these markets, but they don't have investment into waste management systems, and they don't have obviously the fancy recycling textile stuff, and it's feeding into disrupting their ecosystems.
Yeah, it's a big concern, isn't it? Thank you. I think, Martin, you're going to take that first.
I'm going to take that, yeah, thank you. That's of course, that is a question which is really important, and we also need to, as an industry, work on that. I think it's a little difficult, but it's not an easy to answer question, because at the end you need to decide every piece of second-hand garment, if it is really a garment which can be still reused, replaces some fraction of a new garment, where we need to have much more resources, and most of the resources of garments are used in production of these garments and not in the end of life. So there was a study commissioned by EUREC, which is the European Association of Recycling Industries, which came to the conclusion that even if one second-hand garment only replaces 10 second-hand garments only replace one new garment, it would be still ecologically more viable. And you can of course discuss that, but just to give some impression, so somewhere between 1 to 1 to 1 to 10, that ratio lies. So what we need to do is we need to, and then the question is what is replaced. So the second-hand garment, let's say from Europe or from the US, in Ghana, is it replaced by a garment from a local production, or is it replaced by a garment from some Asian production which has been not under the same compliance? We get our garments here, so environmentally and socially produced under questionable conditions. So this is a question you need to answer. But I'm fully agreeing that we need to, and this is something we are also looking into, and the industry in general is looking into. We need to build up collection and recycling systems also in the countries we send second-hand garments into. Totally. And I think that's something which is also going to happen. There are some initiatives we are currently discussing with the Tony Blair Institute on that. We are discussing also with the OR Foundation on that, to see how we can solve these issues. And I'm very convinced that we will take responsibility there. But also we need to see that Europe is not the only exporter of second-hand garments into these markets. And I think we need to find a common solution. I think it's not helped if we say we are keeping the garments here in Europe, and then they are going to be replaced by second-hand garments from the US and from China, and by new garments produced under some questionable conditions in Bangladesh or Myanmar or wherever. I think we need to have a holistic approach there.
Thank you, Martin. And I'm so sorry, we're really out of time, but I'm going to let you have one word on this because of your work with the OR Foundation.
Yeah, just as a brand, so we've been in conversations also with the Tony Blair Institute and with the OR Foundation. So we have created what we're calling our EPR fund for projects exactly like what the OR Foundation is doing. It's important for brands to be looking to have a two-pronged approach. One, how to help remediate some of the textile waste issues that the industry as a whole have created in the global south, and then two, how to prevent it in the future now that we have more circularity infrastructure put together and all of that. So working with the OR Foundation, like they very much are working on the ground and working to help the women who are in the Consumato market who are having challenges with their body because of the amount of fabric that they're carrying around as part of their work, and trying to find ways to recycle this material in a better and more productive way so that they can continue to build up their businesses and be able to make a living. And then as we're thinking about, so funding the work that they're doing there, that's amazing for remediation. And then also figuring out partners to work with when it comes to designing a take back program, looking at the different opportunities, and making sure that sorters are pre-sorting locally to make sure that garbage is not getting to the third world, so that only things that are actually sellable in those markets and are good for their economy. Like, we have secondhand shops here, they have secondhand markets there. They don't want our trash. They do want high quality things that they can resell. It's part of their work. So working with
Sorry to have to draw a line under this conversation. We were just getting going. And so carry on at the bar, and I'm just going to ask the audience to thank you guys, and we'll move on to the next
Thank
part.
you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we are terrible timekeepers. It was your job. What are you doing? Okay, so we're going to move on to part 2 now. Would you like to take a seat? Thank you. We're going to be looking at the trip to Indonesia, and actually the second-hand clothing and the market and the impacts came up there. Of course it did. We actually went, the three of us, myself, Cindy and Gwen, travelled around Indonesia as the guests of Asia Pacific Rayon, APR, and Rantai Tekstil Lestari, RTL, one of the 8 Indonesian textile associations. So we visited producers, we visited educational institutions, and we met with government officials to get a sense of what was happening across the country. We also delivered a road mapping workshop in Jakarta to 55 industry leaders, building on our previous road mapping work at the United Nations in October last year. And later on this evening, we're going to be hearing a bit more about what progress they've made since we visited. So we saw that they are ready for change. It's got a huge stake in the industry. It's among the top 10 textile producing countries in the world, with a GDP of 1.19 trillion American dollars in 2021. So it's really kind of a considerable market, even though you might not necessarily know many of the players. And we were greatly encouraged, really, by the activities. So grab your popcorn. Metaphysical, really. Yeah, there isn't any popcorn, sorry. But the film is 15 minutes long, so sit back, relax, and we'll have a little chat about it after. Popcorn is the key word. We're in Singapore, and it's day 1 of our trade mission to Indonesia. We've stopped over here for 3 nights. We're acclimatizing, and our first visit, our first meeting of the whole trip is right now in this space behind us, the Cocoon space, and we're here to meet with the Singapore Fashion Council.
This year, WCTD 2023 is looking at east-west, north-south perceptions around circularity, what it means regionally, nationally, and seeing what we can learn and what we can share to build bridges for the future.
From my perspective, we're here to listen and to learn and to understand how the topic of circularity is gaining ground in Singapore and in Indonesia more broadly, and how World Circular Textiles Day can be a platform for all the great work that's already happening, and also kind of the driver for more change.
For me, it's being able to see sort of like a helicopter view of the systems.
So later on today, we are going to the Nanyang Technological University, and we're going to see the Sustex recycling technology that they've been working on.
The university itself, original founding was in 1950, but the NTU that we see today started in 82, so it's just 41 years. But this school, the Materials Science and Engineering, is 31 years old. Yeah, and incredibly, we have the school has achieved #1 ranking in materials science globally in the last 3 years. You know.
Cindy, what do you think of Singapore? It's hot. Well, the first meeting was at the Singapore Fashion Council. We met with a team of 3 there, and we met with some representatives, the CEO, and they showed us their new roadmap, their report. They've actually rebranded in the last year, and they've got a big focus now on sustainability, and they're kind of embedding circularity in sustainability. They've got these pillars. There's a lot of activity, there's a lot of promise, and it's really sort of quite early stages, but really promising. And I love their focus on young people, schools, the next generation.
What really struck me from our meeting with the Sustex team was the fact that Singapore has the exact same volume of post-consumer textile waste as the whole Ireland, island of Ireland does. And they have incredibly low recycling rates, 4%. And that was really striking for me as an Irish woman. But also it made me understand, you know, the real impetus that there is here to find a solution. And the solution has to be something which has what they call urban fit, so that works for a city like Singapore.
My first impressions are I'm quite overwhelmed. I knew I would be, because I knew sort of coming out of academia and then seeing the scale of industry would have a real impact. But yeah, I mean, we were driving through for miles along roads with trees everywhere, and everything is sort of part of this big ecosystem here. And what we've been learning here at the Technology Centre is about how they're really trying to improve all the tiny sort of elements of the whole symbiotic system. Whether that's water, whether that's biodiversity, whether that's the land management and the deforestation and the replanting of trees to counteract the use, the water treatment to put water that's better, more pure back into the river than they're extracting, how they're trying to use less water with the processes. Now, you know, I've been in the industry long enough to know that nothing's perfect, and there's always a lot more improvement that can be made. And the ideal point of view is that we have, you know, carbon positive or earth positive materials. You know, so whenever we talk about materials and climate change and circularity and what's good and what's bad, we've got to look behind the scenes. We've got to really look at the whole system.
So Carey is a vertically integrated textile company. We started in 1979, and we spin our own cottons and polyester, and we weave and knit our own fabrics, dyeing, finishing into our final products of garments and socks and fabrics. So our biggest market is locally Indonesia as well as to Europe. So we've started to reduce our carbon emissions in 2020, and at the moment we have 14.7% of our energy is from solar panels. We've also started to reduce our coal consumption. Currently we have reduced our coal by 30%. We've replaced coal with biomass such as palm shells, coconut shells and wood chips. Our target is to reduce most of our coal by 2025. The target is 100%. And how we can achieve that is by replacing our coal boilers with electric boilers, and that electricity will be sourced from the solar panels. so that we have zero loop carbon emissions going forward. In 2019, we had a discussion with H&M Foundation as well as Hong Kong Reader, a research company in Hong Kong. We started to discuss the opportunities of textile to textile recycling. Bottle to textile is already a mature technology, whereas textile to textile is still a new innovation in this process. So this is the green machine. Two main steps in the green machine. First step is the blend separation, where we separate the cotton from the polyester. And the green machine's main objective is to collect the polyester to put it back into the supply chain. And the second process is the decolorization of the polyester. We'll remove the colors, dye stuff from the polyester. I think in Indonesia, the supply chain is not mature enough. Globally, I think consumer awareness needs to be worked on. And of course, cost is also an issue that comes into play. As we achieve further economies of scale, I believe that costs will go down to a certain extent. There is still a lot of opportunities to recycle fabric. I think a lot of it is still going, unfortunately, to landfills. I hope in the future, each city will have a green machine in their own city, where all of the fabric can be recycled, can be used.
So in the last few days, we've been traveling across Indonesia and seeing a whole range of different recycling technologies, primarily chemical recycling technologies of different natures. So in the first instance, we saw, actually in Singapore, we saw the Sustex technology, which is really distinct in that they're trying to build a technology that has an urban fit, that can work in a highly condensed, compact city and be low effluent, low water, etc., so as to kind of meet the criteria that the government have set there. So a very interesting brief. Then we saw the APR patented technology that's in development. And there, of course, for them, it's crucial that it works on the industrial scale that they operate in, and that all of the component parts, the raw materials, are things that can be sourced from within their existing operations and then feed into their existing large-scale viscose production. And then finally, we've just seen the green machine. I think what it really speaks to is the fact that we need a whole variety of solutions. This is not going to be a silver bullet, you know, one technology solves all the industry's ails. We're at the point in our transition where we're trying to kind of test and compare these different alternatives, and each of them has their own distinct feedstock specifications, their own distinct use cases. So they do have a kind of a potential in different contexts. So it's trying to understand which is the highest potential in these different contexts, and how do we, I suppose, build something that's fit for purpose on a regional or a national scale. So that's been fascinating to see. And also the level of collaboration between all of these technologies, that it doesn't feel like a competitive space, even though it's a highly innovative space.
We mainly process polyester yarn as well as nonwoven for bedding, automotive, as well as insulation. We source our raw materials from post-industrial textile factories as well as post-consumer goods that are donated to us through our affiliated companies. We process around 20 tons each day. Circularity to me and to us as a company means it's a way for us to help manage the waste that is building up in this world. I feel like in Indonesia, they're starting to become more aware of it, but I think there's a key perception that needs to be changed, which is that people look at our product and think, oh, it's waste, must be cheaper than other alternatives, but the amount of work that goes into this, as well as the cost is actually, you know, it's not cheaper.
Where are we going?
We are leaving Bandung and going to Jakarta for our final day.
Holders committed to promote sustainability throughout the value chain of Indonesian textile, garment.
We are ready actually to promote, you know, to come to the young millennials, to the consumers about the world has been shifted, has been changing. It's not only about buying, it's not only about producing, it's not only about consuming, but you should contribute also on how to minimize the impact to the world, to the environment.
It's very fast in Indonesia. A lot of coming capital to Indonesia, including grant, including loan, including investment.
For us, textile is so important for this 270 million population. It's a very clear difference if you look in Europe and many other big markets. They are talking already about responsible materials, sustainable materials, renewable materials, right? But then most of our products here focus also into the domestic market. It should be a collaborative action and then communications. Yeah, brands and international agents or institutions should talk to us first also, at least communicate with us here in Indonesia about what is going to be changed, where Indonesia is all about, and what can Indonesia contribute in those conversations.
Well, we've just had the most amazing week. We had one visit after another to different plants, facilities, to touch, you know, to look hands and look with our eyes, touch things for both chemical and hydrothermal and mechanical recycling and second-hand. Just some of the richest conversations I think I've ever had in my career, to be honest, because it's great being a design academic. It's great working with ideas and young people, but my God, when you go in through those doors and you look at what scale production in Southeast Asia is actually like, you really start to connect the dots.
We have had a whirlwind week. We've only skimmed the surface, but we got a very good snapshot and taste of the culture, the commerce, the tensions, the challenges and the opportunities.
I think the biggest learning for me, something which I knew conceptually, but then it was confirmed this week, was that even though circularity is a holistic solution to the biggest challenges of our time, the solution looks different depending on where you are. You know, the specifics of how to implement it on a regional or a national level really needs to be bespoke and tailored to the context. And I suppose it's just really emphasized again the need for us within our day-to-day work in Europe to build our plans in consideration of the global supply chain and the kind of rebound effects, positive and negative, that things like EU regulation have. Something that we've been advocating for, but this just gives me more fire in my belly to really put that side of the conversation forward than just on circular transition.
Yeah, today I think what's promising is that there's a real recognition that Indonesia wants to take a leadership position.
Kind of call for collaboration, multi-stakeholder collaboration, not only to do with, you know, kind of industry, whether small or large, but also bringing government into the conversation. And I think actually there's a real alignment here in Indonesia where the conversation is really quite far along all the puzzle pieces are there. Hopefully, it's just about bringing people together in the right room to push forward a roadmap in the next year. I think it's very doable.
And that was Indonesia. I have 5 minutes. That's good because I've been told we're extremely over time here. So I will try and rush through this section, which is meant to be all about reflections. And I think we got a really good sense at the end there of reflections. But earlier this week, I carried out a follow-up interview with Basri Kamba, who you saw there in the film, who's the chairman of RTL. And the purpose of our call was to follow up on what's been happening in Indonesia since our visit in May, as well as we wanted to get his input and his perspective on some of the views that are maybe more unsustainable associated with a region like Indonesia. You know, there are a lot of conversations around deforestation, land disputes, draining peatlands for viscose production. And we wanted to ask him to comment on some of these topics because these are areas that we don't want to ignore or bury underground in our conversations around circularity. But also, it's worth pointing out that our ethos at World Circular Textiles Day is to emphasize and amplify all the progress and positive change that's happening. So we really wanted to be out there and to learn about it and to understand what was really happening in the region, what some of the challenges were, and the opportunities. And really, I think one of the things that we found, I think we all here in the room know, that's very important for circularity, is it's about collaboration, it's about accountability, commitments, and transparency. And we got a real sense of that in Indonesia with the stakeholders that we met. So going to the point about progress with Basri, he shared with me that 2 things since we had been there in May. The first is that there is now a bill for textiles currently being discussed, which will hopefully be approved in the House of Representatives in Parliament of Indonesia in 2024, which is a huge milestone for the region, because what we heard from a lot of these producers is, we want to do this, we want to do something, we just don't know what, and we don't know how. So having that roadmap is a really big change and help for them. He also mentioned that they're really noticeably recognizing a shift with more and more designers and companies progressing their innovation and circular fashion efforts. And that there's a real sense that business as usual is moving on. And that was really heartening to hear that they're feeling that. They're getting a real sense of that. Now, we were going to have a quick summary with Gwen and Becky about, we don't have time, about, you know, some of the key recommendations that we had or that we saw in the observations. And I won't go into it, but we have shared some of this on social media. I think just to point out the highlights, we really witnessed that Indonesia is ready for change, really, really ready. We witnessed a real sense of energy and enthusiasm for circularity. And one of the things that struck us all, because we were confused for a while after going to the second-hand market, we were getting this sense that that second-hand and reuse was looked down upon, and we didn't quite know what was going on, because in Europe we see second-hand as being top of the hierarchy of circularity. But I think when you're a country that's flooded with cheap new imports from China and other regions, and you have illegal secondhand clothing coming in and destroying the domestic market it starts to make sense. So that was a real eye-opener for us, that it's not the same in every region. Everyone's got different challenges and differences there. So the other two were collaborate, invest, and educate. That was a really big realization that that's what's needed in the area, in the region, and then scoping and planning for the future. If you want to find out more about this, come and speak to us afterwards. But I'd like to move swiftly into part 3, very exciting, and I will welcome Kate and Gwen to the stage with Jonathan Chippendale, the CEO of Holition, to show some very exciting circularity progress in a way that we haven't quite visualized yet, I hope.
Thank you, Cindy. So I think it's quite interesting now. We've been to Southeast Asia, and now we're going to go into space for the next the next part of the session. The idea for this project started, I think it's fair to say, more than 2 years ago now, when we were first starting World Circular Textiles Day, and we felt really strongly we wanted to be able to represent all the positive action that we knew was already in existence and developing at pace around the globe, and we really wanted to be able to, I guess, cut through the complexity and start to see that action as a whole and start to really learn some new lessons from that. So the project was born, and you're going to get a first look at the visualization today, which we're so excited about. But just to begin with, we'd like to introduce a little bit about how it came about and the process we went through. So if I could just start, Gwen, with you. This project really has, I guess, collided with the global mapping project that we've presented for the last couple of years on World Circular Textiles Day. It'd just be great to hear more about how that came about and how they interact.
Sure. For those who've been celebrating with us year on year, for a few years, you probably know a little bit about this. But for those who don't, from scratch, as you said, we wanted to try and understand what is all the circular activity that's happening around the world, where is it happening, and who's behind it. And Circular Economy as an organisation have this platform that we call the Knowledge Hub. It's like a Wikipedia for circularity. So it is a platform where anyone around the world can upload a circular case, an initiative, a policy, a piece of research, and this gets collated on this digital platform, and we, as Circular Economy, go through what is uploaded, we approve, we curate, and we kind of validate that information. So we said as World Circular Textiles Day, well, let's build the first database or sub-collection on this platform all around textiles. And the way we wanted to do that was through a collective effort. So we engaged with, I think in the end, around 90 global volunteers from all around the world who started mapping. They were like investigative journalists for us, trying to capture all of these individual case studies, get them up on the platform. And we did that 2 years in a row, and we mapped hundreds of cases. The challenge is, so what? I mean, how often do you spend your evenings trawling through a platform? Very rarely, speaking for myself at least. It's a wonderful thing if you're in that space, you're an academic or a researcher, or I suppose you're really passionate about this, but it's very hard to kind of zoom out and understand what all that data means as a collective. What does it tell us about the world? What does it tell us about where we are, where we should be going? And so we felt really strongly that there would be power in trying to visualize the complex data that we were collecting and enter
Holition.
Jonathan and Holition, who probably thought we were a bit mad. And that's why it took about 2 years to kick off the collaboration.
So that leads me nicely to the next question. What on earth were you thinking, Jonathan? Why did you want to work with us on this project?
I guess I'm currently thinking, well, I'm sitting quite high up here. We often get asked, or I often get asked who Holition is and what we are, and it's a question I find really difficult to answer because we are a number of different things. I mean, by day, we're a creative technology studio. We work very much at the intersection between kind of science and art in that cultural kind of what some people call STEAM, and lots of the work that we do is with fashion, luxury and beauty. In fact, most of the work we do by day is with luxury, fashion and beauty. And one of the great things about working with some of these huge brands like Chanel and Louis Vuitton and Burberry is they have budgets, and budgets bring income, and we are able then to use that income to do kind of other stuff that is perhaps more interesting to us, and perhaps has a little bit more relevance to us as human beings. So I think when we started talking, there were a few things that the conversations kind of fed into. One is, I guess, as a studio that's very interested in innovation and that relationship between humans and technology, a lot of our sort of drive is to look on the other side of the mountain and down into that valley and to understand and to learn about new things. And we come at this, there's experts everywhere in this room, except for myself. So that idea of being able to learn about something is critical to me and critical to the various people that kind of work in the studio. I think, secondly, some of the work that we've done in that more sort of cultural sector for ourselves, working with United Nations on refugee, on movement of refugees, or projects around dementia, or projects around climate change, those things are really important to us, and everything that we're talking about today is really critical. And I guess the third thing is, I can remember a while ago taking some of the team to see Al Gore talking about climate change, and what was fantastic about it was that, to start with, it was dystopian and it was dark, but by the end of it, there was a lot of hope, and there was a lot of opportunity by basically climate change being solved by billions of people doing things in slightly different ways, and digital is a very good way of taking communication at scale to people all over the planet, and to try and get them to do little things at scale to make massive shifts. And that's really at the heart of this, and if, as a result of the work that we've done, we can start to, or play a part in instigating that change, then I can go home after this session, I can give my kids a kiss goodnight and feel that I've done something positive. So that. I guess it's personal, Kate. That's what I'm trying to say.
I mean, it's fantastic, and we're delighted you took the challenge. But it's interesting you talking about this idea of lots of small actions adding up, and that was something that we felt strongly about at the beginning. And although the initial brief, I guess, was how can we show that individual efforts can combine to create change on a global scale, actually it became much more about how can we then use that to create more action. And so it'd just be nice to know, how did you approach that as a brief at Holition?
Well, I mean, one of the very first team members who stayed with us for sort of almost 15 years, and then now it's gone to pursue their own vision, their own startup in a completely different area. But she did her PhD in museology, and her particular focus was how to draw people in a gallery, for example, how to draw people towards art and to give them additional information about that piece, but without the technology getting in the way of the art. And she called it technology in the wild. And that, because in those days there were like 4 or 5 of us, that kind of drove a lot of our approach to these projects. And I guess that translates into, can we create something that looks mesmeric or beautiful, but not obvious, so that we can draw people into that piece, and then people can find their own insights, because I'm really sort of taken with that notion of the teachers that we remember at school were the ones that allowed us to find out for ourselves, or showed us how to find out insights for ourselves, and didn't just talk at us and tell us what to think. So if we can stop people, draw people in, and get them starting to draw the lines and to kind of create those kind of roots and those insights, and then walk away with that insight, and maybe as a byproduct of that, start to find out things for themselves, then I think we've done our job. And I hope that's kind of what we've done. But don't take my word for it. A lot of the team are in the audience here, so they'll tell you in far more detail exactly the sort of minutiae of how we actually got to where we ended up.
I mean, the word insight was something that, we had right from the start. We felt there would be hidden messages somewhere in this piece of work. And Gwen, it'd be great to hear, what for you were the big learnings or surprising insights from the process.
Yeah, I think the first learning was just a learning from working with the Holition team, because the first meetings we had, they said, okay, what do you want us to do? And I was kind of like, did you not read the brief? They're like, no, but what are we doing? What is the story that you want to tell with this data? There are so many ways that we could cut this, it's a data set, but depending on what piece of the data we put forward, it will tell a different story, it will invoke a different reaction in the person who's watching. And so for us, it really became about, you know, showing the progress that we've seen in this space over time, and then trying to also highlight and slice the activity according to the different strategies, so that we can see how much work is actually happening when we talk about design versus using waste as a resource versus prioritizing regenerative resources. You know, how can you start to then make sense of where energy is high around certain circular strategies and where energy is low, and why that possibly could be. The second thing, as soon as you start mapping data onto a map, you know, the first thing you see is the progress. The second thing you see is all the big black empty voids on the map. And that triggers a huge conversation about why is that? Is that because there's not stuff happening? Or is that because we don't have visibility of it? And it's more often than not the latter. I mean, we are just skimming the tip of the iceberg with the data set that we have. And that will grow over time, but also, of course, there's huge swathes of activity that we will never capture, largely because it is informal work, especially when it comes to circular economy. You know, there is so much repair, reuse happening in domestic setting or on the street, we will never have visibility over. And the third thing I would say, which was really only an insight that we had last week, was when we started tracking over time, one of the first data sets which confused us all was in 1900. We thought, is this when the circular textiles movement began? But of course, you know, you have to draw a line at some stage, because we talk about this transition, but it's a transition because we went off the mark for so many years. This was a case of a Kantha textile blanket in India in the 1900s. Of course, we were circular long before we were linear. So this was also a huge insight. And of course, we could project as far back as the beginning of time if we're really looking at circular data.
Well, talking of which, I think we should see the film, right? Could we have the lights dimmed and over to you? this is actually one of my favourite bits of the film, seeing how many people worked on this project. But we're going to let it run while we just finish up the conversation. But thank you, Jonathan, and to the whole team. I think I know that we really appreciate, you know, everything that went into this project. And well, it just feels like the start, doesn't it? It feels like we're just skimming the surface. So just to round off, maybe just where is this going to go next? What do you see as the opportunity or, you know, the potential for this moving forward?
I'll start.
Gwen, you start.
I would love, obviously, to build the data set, but I also would love to make it more actionable, you know, because now it tells you something. But imagine if this was really a live tracking, a dashboard that was tracking automatically the development as we see it. So every case that goes in the knowledge hub automatically goes up, but then it becomes intelligent over time, and it starts to tell us kind of trends that we're seeing, gaps that the industry has, and also that it could overlay different levels of data and information. I mean, you spoke about rehubs, the analysis that they've done on the sorting capacity needed across Europe. That could be overlaid. Material flow data that we're capturing on a regional, national level could be overlaid. So I would love for it to become smarter, interactive, and live.
Yeah, so I mean, I completely second that, Gwen, completely. So, I mean, feeding in, this is just raw data, but it doesn't necessarily give the insights behind or why an initiative occurs and that kind of journey the initiative has gone. I was talking about a project we did with the UN. It was the refugee one, but it started out around climate change, and Unilever, as one of the sponsors, gave us huge amounts of data, and I was just going through this data and seeing that in India, sales of washing powder were absolutely accelerating away, and then the UN gave us some data, and I was looking at that data, and they were talking about water shortages, and you can map the increase in washing powder, i.e. middle class, emerging middle class in India, and the washing machine being a symbol of status, and therefore drawing huge amounts of water and water shortages, and you could literally correlate them out. So it's really interesting to put sort of two completely separate data sets into this and just see what additional insights come out. So that's kind of one thing. I think absolutely the ability to go back to 1900, to go today and to see, I guess, a relatively flat increase, but then a bit like Moore's law, where computing power doubles every 2 years, seeing the kind of curve steepen and steepen, and recognize that if you extrapolate that out by another 80 or 100 years, that actually we're really starting to make progress and providing the hope that I was talking about. But I think also to kind of kickstart or to get that behavioral change, are there ways that we could use this to sort of give people awareness of their behavior, so that it's not just from the industry point of view, but from the consumer point of view. And I'm sort of very, very minded of a project that we did, which was clothing that changed color according to air quality in Paris. And actually people that wore it changed their behavior because they could see the impact of the environment on that. They were not walking down busy streets and finding quieter ways to get to work, and perhaps shopping more online than going into the Champs-Élysées. And again, can we use this information at a kind of scale level just to kind of start those butterfly wings beating that kind of affects change on the other side of the world? But it's early days.
Thank you. I think that that word action is really, you know, what's jumped out from this part of the discussion, that it's not just about showing what is happening and what has been happening, but we want it to be a catalyst for, you know, more action, and also we want to fill in those black spaces you were describing.
Yeah, when I looked at it, I thought I was ashamed by how dark Ireland was. I thought that is not representative of what's happening there. So I suppose the call to action is get your cases up, check if you are represented, and if not, get going on it. And I think that's a really good note to end on, and also to mention, as Becky mentioned at the beginning of the day today, that in addition to this beautiful video and the call to action to contribute to it in the future, we also have a toolkit that launches today, which will be available online from tomorrow, and that is really to empower everyone around the world to start hosting their own WCTD events into the future, so that we're not the ones speaking here next year, but we're attending someone else's fantastic event. As we've seen, it's started to kick off in the Philippines, in Indonesia, and other places, and we want to keep scaling and empowering that movement to happen. So on that
Fantastic.
on that final note, on that bombshell, I would invite you all to give yourselves a big round of applause and to please join us for a drink and some networking at the bar. Thank you all so much.